Motivation, still lingering, still applied. Okay, so I just heard that there's something great taking place. You're all very confused. Very good. You get a sense what it feels like to learn about Buddhism. Because I spent about 17 years being very confused. I'm still very confused. No, I'm kidding. Of course, there's certain degrees of confusion, there's difficulty. And this particular course, what is so difficult is that mindfulness is important at all times. It is important at the beginning, in the middle, at the end. So in those 2 days, to talk to you about mindfulness in the Tibetan tradition, well, we do need to address, at least give you a rough sense of the initial stages of mindfulness, the middling ones, and then the more advanced stages. And of course, if you're new to this, there'll be a degree of confusion. But I'm in Israel, and I don't worry about that. People have such a drive to learn, so if there's confusion, instead of turning away, usually people want to learn more. So it's just part of the culture. So I'm not terribly concerned, but I also hear what you're saying, and also, of course, to start meditating. To do some meditation. I want to do that together with all of you, because in that very concentrated space, it's easier to get a better understanding, a deeper understanding, so that you can remember easier. It's easier to contain or to retain what you've learned, and then that way build from there. Of course, I also don't know what you know. I mean, there's some very advanced students. I mean, people who've studied for so many years, and then there are those of you who may never have heard of the Four Noble Truths. So surely it's confusing. So please don't expect to walk away with understanding everything. Since I'm saying, I mean, if you have started reading this text, what we've done is nothing so far. So it's only to give you a sense, to give you a taste. So you'll always walk away with understanding something. It's not like you'll be totally, but don't expect the whole thing. Because like I said, this is just giving you a sense of mindfulness according to this particular tradition. Okay. But I'll try, and we have question and answer time. There'll be plenty of opportunity to go deeper. And now with the second session for today, as I said, I want to introduce some simple meditations to just go over what we've done so far. Guided analytical meditations. Okay. But to return to the topic here, well, basically, if the initial explanation, the foundational, or the what can you call it, the basic explanation of the 4 types of mindfulness are not yet clear, well, my understanding is that Glenn gave a whole course on it, and if you were not able to participate, some of you had the opportunity to listen to it, but if you haven't had that, please do, by all means. That explains it in more detail, because that was part of the previous course, which is the foundation or the basis. It builds up one on top of the other. But then, of course, what we've been doing, we've been looking at mindfulness, being aware of body, mind, feeling, and so forth, taking certain aspects to mind. And I want to just briefly mention the first part with regard to the body. Becoming aware of the nature of our body. Not just becoming aware of it in general, okay, just watching the sensations in the body, but to take a further understanding the nature of this body, its limited nature, in other words, its unclean, or for lack of a better word, its limited nature, its fragility. Is that a word? Being fragile, like the fragility of the mind, of our body, etc. And in that way, we come to understand what is called the truth of suffering, in the sense that when we describe the Four Noble Truths, they're described like a disease. The analogy is that of a disease. We suffer from certain symptoms that are not supposed to be there. They're not supposed to be there because what our most important aggregate, the thing that is most important, is our mind. We have this incredible mind, which has the potential to experience incredible happiness, to experience incredible love and compassion. It has the capacity to understand phenomena as they really are. But temporarily, this incredible potential of the mind cannot fully manifest. It is obstructed. It is obstructed by our misperception of reality, which then led to all sorts of other afflictive states of mind and to the resultant body that we've taken now. So that's like the symptom. Having this present body, this present mind, is the symptom. And the cause of it is our misperception of reality. So the symptom is the truth of suffering. It's our present, it's the reality of states of mind that are dissatisfactory. States of a body that are dissatisfactory. It doesn't have to be like that. This is a temporary state which is merely a result of our actions in the past that are limited. So our mind has limited itself in the sense that, or it's not has limited itself. It seems to imply some intention, no, but it is limited by not understanding how phenomena really exist. That is the origin. But the result is this body. We are born with this body. And actually, we're also born with this mind because the type of mind we have right now is determined by our body. In a sense, we have a human mind. We have 5 sense faculties which are quite limited in what we can perceive. Right? We don't perceive what dolphins perceive. We don't perceive what dogs perceive or cat perceive. So we're limited in our sense perceptions. We have a very limited perception. The things that exist around us, gamma waves and radio waves and microwaves, none of those we perceive. So we only have a very limited spectrum of shapes and colors that we can see. Limited sound, limited smell. And we believe this is it. We believe we see things as they are, but we're quite limited. We're limited by our brain, right? Certain things we can retain, but at some point we can no longer retain it. We're limited by our body. We have a limited brain. It can do a lot. Oh my God, so much more than the brain of a pishpishim. I have to use my favorite word at some point. My favorite word is shashuka, but shashuka doesn't have brain as a brain. So, so I use pishpishim or bedbug. Okay, so our brain can do so much more than the brain of a bedbug. But nonetheless, it is still limited. So because we have this body, so basically with the first type of mindfulness, we're focused on what we have right now. We have this body, and because of the existence of this body, our mind manifests within the limits of this body, this brain. Okay? So our mind cannot fully manifest. It cannot fully manifest in a way in which it potentially could if we weren't bound to this body. It's not about committing suicide. Oh God, I want to get rid of the body. We'll just end up taking another one. So that's not the solution. But just understanding our limited state right now. That's it. Not that hard. It's limited, right? This kind of body. It's very valuable. Very valuable, what we have. We can use that as a basis, but it's limited nonetheless. So we aim for something greater. There's something greater we can do with this amazing mind that we all have with us, but that is temporarily obstructed. So that's the first type of mindfulness. Become aware of the body. Okay? I think that's, although I used a lot of different words, a lot of difficult terminology, but you all get that. Hey, do you agree? I mean, all of you, there may still be some questions and some doubts, but that's great. Questions and doubt lead to further inquiry. And don't expect to gain understanding of Buddhism quickly. Why do you think monks and nuns study for 17 or, and that's nothing, 17 years is nothing actually. It only starts really there. And then you go further and you go further. So it takes time. But you have already some foundation and you build from there and new questions arise. Questions are great. Questions are great. This is the first step to understanding. If you listen, you have no question, either you really get the whole thing and you're like a super brain, or there's a problem. So questions should arise, confusion should arise. But anyway, this part I think is clear. So I'd like to start now with the first meditation. We've done a lot of intellectualizing, a lot of discussion, etc. So let's just meditate on exactly that point. And I'll guide you through the meditation. And it's up to you to take the points I suggest you to reflect upon. I give you some points, some guiding points like that you could reflect upon. But then you take it from there and reflect deeper. Okay, so I'll just guide you through it. I'll speak a little bit in between. And then the rest of the time, it's up to you to further analyze. Okay, all right. So we'll do this for about 10 to 15 minutes. So first, to settle the mind, spend a few moments just focusing on the breathing. So to clear our mind from any preconceptions, any scattered thoughts. Now focus your attention on your entire body. Starting with the top of your head and then slowly moving downwards. All the way down to your toes. And make sure that you relax all those parts you're going through. So start by being mindful of your skull, your face, and the rest of your head. Utilize your alertness, your mindfulness, and your introspection. And then pay attention to your neck, and your chest area. Let go of any tension. And just observe. Be aware of your arms. And then scan through the lower part of your chest, your belly, your stomach. And finally, focus your attention your mindfulness on your behind, your upper legs, your knees, and then slowly move towards your calves and then your feet. Try to keep your attention only focused on your body. Body being totally relaxed. And let's now start to pay attention to the nature of this body. Reflect on its fragile nature. It is so prone to disease and illness. is easily exhausted. You have to constantly feed it. Then every night we spend about 8 hours sleeping, resting the body. And if we don't clean it regularly, it'll start to smell. And we may get sick. So although this body is all we have, it is the vessel of our present mind. It does limit the amazing potential of our ability to understand phenomena and to experience limitless love and compassion. but not just us. Not just we are restricted by our present limited body, but so are other sentient beings. All sentient beings have this amazing capacity this wonderful consciousness but like us, they're temporarily limited by their physical bodies. Which are responsible for the suffering of birth, aging, sickness and death. And so now to conclude this analytical meditation, try to spend a few moments very mindfully focusing on whatever feeling has arisen as a result of engaging in this investigation, in this type of analysis. Focusing on the body. So you just generated close placement of mindfulness on the body. That's basically how it's described in Gyaltsabje's and Lama Tsongkhapa's text. That you focus on the body, first you just observe, and then reflect upon the fact that the body is limited, it's fragile, etc. And not just your own body, but to then take it to the body of other sentient beings, that although we all have this amazing mind, this incredible mind, but we're limited by our body. So I don't think it's that hard to understand, in the sense that if we really think about it, how much time we have to spend every day feeding the body, cleaning the body, going to the bathroom. 8 hours, we lie there comatose, just resting the body. So we have this incredible mental ability, which unfortunately is limited by the body. And so that concerns our present predicament, our present situations, which is described as the reality of suffering, or the truth of suffering, of like a state which we're in right now that is dissatisfactory. Okay, and then the next is the mindfulness, the close mindfulness of feeling, where you focus on the second truth. What is the cause of this? Why do we have this body? Why are we in a situation like that, which is dissatisfactory, which potentially gives rise to all sorts of problems and difficulties, having this body and therefore also this particular mind. And here we're focusing on feelings, because we crave pleasant feeling, we are repulsed by negative feelings or unpleasant feelings, and we generate indifference when it comes to neutral feelings. So those are afflictive states of mind, in particular craving, attachment, grasping. Okay, they're negative states of mind. And so for those of you who are new to this, of course, there's a lot more to learn about these different types of afflictions. But basically, we all know that it doesn't feel good to feel attachment, craving, grasping. We're unsettled. We're worried. When we get what we want, we're worried we lose it. If we don't get what we want, we're worried that we don't have it. So there's all with regard to attachment and craving and grasping. We never really feel settled. We always feel worried or fearful. Anxiety arises easily, etc. So those are all states of mind that right away make us unhappy, but in the long term cause a lot of problems. So those are the perpetrators. Those are the real causes of all our problems and difficulties. For us, it's like the external environment. It's what someone says. It's what how another person acts, etc. So to us, it seems it's everything but our own mind that is responsible for problems. We see pleasure within external things. We see repulsion in external things. But it's actually, those are just the triggers. And those triggers give rise to certain feelings, and then they give rise to all sort of different afflictive emotions. So that's what we're caught in. We're not liberated, we're not free, because we're under the control of these afflictive emotions. They make us unhappy when they arise, and they lead to further suffering. So in that way we're imprisoned by those. Which is why it's not a good idea to let our anger go wild, which is one question that comes up again and again in the context of anger, because it seems to give us some strength and some ability to do something, to make changes. But actually, if instead of anger and resentment, we were to generate love and understanding, then we would have much more energy to resolve the problem constructively. Okay? So therefore, when we talk of the mindfulness of feeling, we basically focus on, feeling as that which gives rise to the afflictions. We don't blame that which gives rise to the feeling. We also don't blame the feeling as such. It is the afflictions that are the problem. But by observing the trigger, the feelings themselves, we become more aware of the afflictions and of course of their disadvantages. And that is the second truth, the truth of the origin of suffering, which the main origin are our afflictive emotions. starting with the misperception of reality, believing or grasping, holding on to phenomena existing objectively and independently, as if things were good or bad in and of themselves, as if the things we perceive with our mind existed objectively out there, as if there was a self, a separate separate I, again, not just a perception, not just perceived by our mind, but independently existing, independent of our mind, of our awareness. And then, following from that, our sense that that I is more precious than everyone else's I, that this existence, this I needs to be cherished more than the I of others. So there's a number of different misperceptions. So the basic one is our misperception of things existing concretely, in and of themselves, not relatively, but what is described as inherently or objectively. Okay? So this is very hard to understand. Please don't expect to understand that over a weekend course. I mean, you can spend years and years, but just to get a general sense, there's a general misperception, and then that misperception, in particular with regard to who am I, who I am, what is the I? The sense that there is some I, there's something there, something solid there that does not exist in dependence on me perceiving that I, but it seems to exist in and of itself. And then that giving rise to what's called self-centeredness. So this I is just a little bit more important than everyone else's. So this I is more precious. My happiness, the happiness of this I, the well-being of this I, that is more important than that of others. And as a result of that, anger, when my happiness is threatened, and grasping, when there's something that provides me with happiness. So it all comes down to that misperception. But basically here with the next step, the next close placement of mindfulness, it mainly focuses on craving. It mainly focuses on the afflictions. So basically what I just said is there's a misperception first, a misperception of reality. We don't perceive phenomena as they really are, and that gives rise to craving. That gives rise to holding on to this I. Actually, what we do is when we misperceive reality, we misperceive everything. This I and everything else. But because this I is closest to me, to my awareness, so my consciousness, it creates this idea of you existing inherently and objectively, and this table existing objectively. But not just that, it also creates this idea of this I existing objectively. And since that is closest to my awareness, to my perception, due to its closeness, this is here and you're over there, I'm more attached. I crave this more. This becomes the center of my reality. I. This is me. And from now on, everything is determined, everything is informed by, everything is controlled by that sense that this I, that I actually just create in my mind, that doesn't exist the way I construct it in my mind, that I is more important than everyone else's. So when I say we're not free, we're actually totally under the control of that mind that tells us, do this for the I, do this for the self, work harder, be successful, have a good reputation. Actually, one of my teachers, again, Geshe Kelsang Wangmo, he one day he puts it really beautifully. The way he, in one of his teachings, he said it so poignantly. He said that what we do for this mind that tells us I, we work for that mind, basically. From morning to evening, we wake up. I need coffee. I need breakfast. I need a shower. I don't want to be with this person. I. There's this mind that's not always there, but every now and then, very frequently, it pops up. And because of that, it drives us to do this, that, and the other. So we're like slaves. We're slaves to that awareness. And so what Geshe Kelsang Wangmo once said was, if we had to do that for someone else, we would not last for longer than 2 weeks. 2 weeks, a month at the most. Right? Imagine you live with someone, and instead of this awareness telling you do this, that, and the other, it's this person telling you, run back and forth. I need a shower. I need to go to the bathroom. I need this. I need that. I may be so exhausted in the end of the just one day. So here, we don't even question it. From the day we were born, well, at some point, I want this. I want that. We're slaving away for something that we don't really understand what it is. We don't question it, right? I this, I that. We never question. Initially, we never ask, what is that I? We just accept. There's a thought I, so it must be there. Okay? So it better be there, actually. Seriously. I mean, for how many years have I been slaving away? It better be there. I mean, imagine the fact we come to see that this awareness which perceives such an I, its object doesn't exist. What a waste of time and energy. Of course, I'm not talking about keeping alive and, sustaining this mind and body. No, that's very precious. But that's not what we do. We take it to a different level. We exaggerate. We take it further. Need to be successful. Need to have a good reputation. My children need to have a good education. Right? This whole thing, I mean, in the end, it's meaningless. Who cares? Even if you don't have it, it's not the end of the world. It's okay. Right? But we feel like I can only be something. I can only be, if I have this, I have that. So we're constantly on our toes. We never really get to relax. And the stronger is, the more disturbed even our sleep gets. I didn't get this. I got my car scratched. My house, So there's this obsessiveness. And therefore, when we talk about not being liberated, really what it comes down to being a slave to this mind. I. I'm more precious. I need this. I need that. Even our self-hatred is a result of that. I don't like myself because I should be perfect. I don't care. My neighbor is not perfect. That's okay. I can forgive him or her. In fact, I may rejoice he or she is not perfect, right? But I need to be perfect because I'm a little bit more important. So I cannot have faults. I need to be the best. And if I don't, I hate myself. So self-hatred also comes again from that obsessive mind that exaggerate what's actually there. So it's terrible. We suffer unnecessarily because our mind holds on to something that actually doesn't exist in that way. I'm not saying we don't exist, but not in that way. We just add a little bit more to what's actually there. And because we've already exaggerated when we perceive the I, everything that follows can only be exaggerated. Of course we're precious, but so is everyone else. But if I exaggerated that I, and I exaggerated the importance of that I have no space for others, no energy left. How can I be concerned with others' happiness if my happiness is most important? Then everyone else is only secondary to me. So you see how we just exaggerate. We keep exaggerating. We exaggerate the importance of this I. If someone harms this I, my reaction is likewise an exaggerated one. Exaggerated anger, repulsion. And these are all emotional states that always add something to what's actually there. Taking away all our energy. So, therefore, it basically comes down to our misperception of reality. So our misperception of reality then leads to craving. So, when we say self-cherishing is actually a type of craving. It's a type of attachment. My happiness. Self-cherishing is an attitude that considers my own happiness to be more important than that of others. It's a type of attachment to my happiness. Okay? And so feeling is that which keeps it going. It's this feeling when I feel happy, okay, that's what I need, that's what I want. So more craving arises. When I feel unhappy, there's anger, there's aversion, and so forth. So here, we talk about the misperception of reality, and then that gives rise to craving. And craving is fed by feeling. So being aware of feeling, becoming aware of feeling, we can recognize initially our craving, our holding on to this, our holding on to that. And then becoming more aware of that, we start to analyze, what is that craving? What does it crave? What is it attached to? And it comes down to being attached to the I. So then we look at the I. Okay? So, therefore, we're actually now moving. First we had the close placement of mindfulness on the body. The limited nature of our existence. Then we move on to feeling. Feeling, understanding that that feeling gives rise to all these distorted emotions. Craving, attachment, grasping, anger, jealousy, right? All these different emotions, which basically, I feel good, so therefore I crave the object that makes me feel good. Because of our misperception, of course, we're very good at, or very bad at, differentiating between the object that triggered the feeling and the feeling itself. We fuse the two together. So instead of craving the craving, I crave that which I believe to be the cause of craving. And I believe that cause to be intrinsically able to give rise to craving. Something intrinsic in that person that gives rise to a positive feeling. If that was really intrinsic in it, and that's what's going to be in here with regard to feeling, if there was something intrinsic in that person, in that object, I should always be happy when I perceive that object. Always. I could never be unhappy when I met that object, if it was something intrinsic in that person. Right? But the point is here, we confuse the two. So we crave the objects, these external objects, because we believe they are that feeling. This person, this object, is what gives rise to that, is that feeling itself. We don't really differentiate between them. But there's the object, it gives rise to a feeling, and it doesn't do so at all times. If it was intrinsic in it, like certain foods, this food should always give the same pleasure. But all you need to do is keep eating. Just keep eating. 10 minutes of eating hummus. Hummus is very good. It very quickly turns around. However good it is, but boy, that stuff makes you feel heavy. So 15 minutes of eating, half an hour of eating hummus. So if the objects we crave, it was really in the object, it should make us happier as we continue doing it. But it's the other way around. The initial feeling of pleasure and so forth turns around. So therefore we confuse the object, and we crave all these objects outside of ourselves, thinking that they give us lasting happiness. But because they don't, we jump all the time. We need to jump from this object and that object. We're so busy. Of course we have no time to meditate. How could we be? We get up in the morning, we need a cup of coffee to make us feel better. And then we need breakfast. And then we need a shower. And then we need someone telling us that they love us, that we're important. And then we need to right? Because it never lasts long enough, and eventually it turns, so we need to jump from one thing to another. I mean, total slaves to our craving for pleasant feelings. That's it. We jump from one to the next. We're like on these wobbly stones, like jumping from one to the next, hoping to find that one stone that we can stay on, that gives us that lasting, and we never find it because we look in the wrong place. So therefore, that is what feeling is concerned with. We'll do a meditation on that. But, as I said earlier, I'll introduce the last two, and so then it makes more sense to you, hopefully, in the context of meditating on them. What is the next thing we need to do is to generate close placement of mindfulness on the mind. Why on the mind? Because the perpetrator, the actual cause, the actual origin, or the actual root of all our trouble is our misperception of the I. It's the misperception of who we are. And what do we associate the I with mostly of mind and body? Mostly the mind. Mostly the mental consciousness. So when we look at what is the I, we definitely look here. We look towards the body. We look towards what is the I here in this area. But of the true mind and body, it is really basically the mind. This is also true with regard to other people. So when we're with another person, our sense of this other person, who this person is, we don't associate it with their body, but more with their mind. Maybe initially, on first meeting them, oh, good looking or not. But then what becomes most important is their character. We associate this person, we define that person on the basis of their mental consciousness. Are they kind or not, patient or not, attentive or not? All this is mental consciousness. Those are all characteristics that are found within the mental consciousness. So when we start looking for what is the person, the more we look, the more we check, the more we end up focusing on the mental consciousness. And so some philosophical systems therefore actually posit the mental consciousness as being the person. But that, according to the highest philosophical Buddhist school, the Prasangika, is wrong. The mental consciousness is one of the major aggregates, the major skandhas, the main ingredients of a person, but it's still not the person. It's not the I. And so, what is the I? Well, the I is just what we call, what we label on either the mind or the body. That's it. What we label on mind and body. A certain mind has a thought, we think I. And that's it. We can call that I. Or the body moves in a certain way, so I say I move. It's just how we basically decided to use the word I. Anything to do with the mind or body, if any of those parts does something, I say I do. That's the case with regard to anything else. When we were born, we started to see things all around us, and to make sense of the stuff around us, we basically categorize things totally randomly, in the sense that there's nothing in and of themselves in these objects that require for them to be called cup or cushion or whatever. But for the sake of convenience, we started labeling things in a certain way, guided by our parents, of course. But it's nothing intrinsic in the object that tells us it's a cup. Right? And so once we've drawn these lines around certain objects, those invisible lines in the sense of just designating them, once we've done that, so when you point at this thing, we say you point at the cup. When you lift another part of this, you say, you move the cup. Or if you move the handle, or you hold the handle, you say, I hold the cup. That's it. So just based on certain parts that we associate with this labeled cup, the moment we do something with those parts, we say, I do this with a cup. Okay, that's all. But to us, it seems as if there were those parts, and there are those parts, of course. It seems to us that those are the parts of the cup, but there's also a cup that owns those parts. There's a cup that has a handle, that has a lid, that has a top, that has a bottom. And similarly with the I, although we started off just labeling, but because our mind always over solidifies or over concretizes, is that a word? Concretize? Over concretizes what's actually there, it always adds a little bit more of an existence. So instead of me going, I think, having that thought, I think, because an awareness on the basis of which I label I has just had a thought, I have a sense there's a separate I that now owns the mind and body, that controls mind and body. Right? So, therefore, and I mainly associate that with the mind. So, when I think of the mind, mainly associate the mind with that I, there is a sense there must be something there. There must be something permanently there. There must be some entity there. It's actually very interesting. When I had this discussion with Jonathan in the break, Jonathan said to me, actually, there must be something objectively there. Must be something objectively out there. Why? Because there's something, I have a perception of an object there today, and I have one tomorrow. So because it's here today and it's there tomorrow, there's a consistency, so therefore there must be something out there. That's a very interesting correlation between permanence and something intrinsically there, objectively there. Because our sense of phenomena existing objectively, of existing independent of a subjective awareness, having some independent existence, always comes along with the idea there must be something permanent, there must be something that is always there. What's very interesting, when Jonathan said it's there today and it's there tomorrow, actually it isn't. What I perceive today is not the same as what I perceive tomorrow. It is similar but not the same. When I say, this is Yechiam, I was here last year. This is the same place I was last year. No, it's not the same place. It's still called Yechiam, but that's about it. Everything about Yechiam has totally changed. The insects, the bugs, the people, there's nothing left the same from last year. But I think I'm back in the same place. No, it's totally changed. I still call it Yechiam, that's it. But my sense is there's something concrete there that can be called Yechiam. And therefore, if it's concrete, if it's independent, the way it feels, it has to also still be there. So there's this strong correlation. My sense of I is similar. I'm just imputing I on the body doing certain things, the mind doing certain things. But I believe there's something separate from. It's not just me imputing it. There is an I that is still there. To such a degree that if you ask me, the I that walked into this room an hour or whatever ago, to keep track of time, an hour ago, and the I that's still here, it feels as if it's the same I. It feels that's the same I, right? The I that came here kind of said hi, sat down, and the I that's still talking, there's a sense that's the same. A sense. I'm not saying rationally. No, of course, my mind and body, they have changed in the meantime, but that's not how it feels. Deep within my guts, it feels like same I. Same I that arrived in Tel Aviv a few days ago, etc. So that is a sense of permanence and objective existence. That correlation. So therefore, with the third type of close place for mindfulness, you reflect upon the impermanence of the mind. If you reflect upon the impermanence of the mind, we associate the I mainly with the mental consciousness. And if that's impermanent, if that is ever changing, it's very difficult to hold on to a permanent I. So understanding the impermanence of the mind facilitates our understanding of the lack of a self. But it can lead to falling into the extreme of nihilism. I don't exist. Where again, understanding the impermanence of the mind helps me to understand I do exist. Although I only exist as an ever-changing phenomenon labeled on the mind, but since the mind continues on and it's changing all the time, I do exist. Even though I only exist conventionally, but I'm not totally non-existent. So understanding the impermanence of the mind helps us to overcome our misperception of the self as being inherently, permanently existent, one extreme, versus being totally non-existent. Am I making sense? Right? Okay. I will repeat it. I will, of course. I was going to do exactly that right away. Okay. Now, let's look at the first two. I'll explain the first two again, just so it makes more sense in the whole context. First of all, when we go through the Four Noble Truths, what we need to do is understand suffering. Understand the suffering nature of our existence right now, or the limited existence right now, which is not natural. To us it seems natural because we don't know anything else, but it is actually not the way it's supposed to be. This limited body, and therefore our mind being so limited. So, understanding the nature of our body helps us to understand the all-pervasive suffering that we experience because we have this body, and therefore also a particular mind, limited by this body. So what is the cause of that? The cause are our afflictions, mainly our craving, based on the misperception of reality, but mainly our craving. And where does that arise from? From the different feelings we have. So understanding feeling, how it works, how it gives rise to our craving, and then other afflictions, we understand the truth of the origin of suffering. And then we need to look at what is the root even of craving? Well, it's our misperception of reality. Our misperception of reality is with regard to any object, but mainly with regard to our self. So we perceive phenomena to exist concretely and permanently and separately from their parts. So this is true for anything. Table, clock, other people, myself. But the problem is with regard to myself, since that is closest to the mind that perceives, that misperceives phenomena, I feel that is just a little bit more precious. You're just a little bit less precious, less important. Unless you take care of my happiness, then you become more important. Your importance grows in relation to what you do to me, for me. Let's be honest, right? Okay. So, therefore, I need to check. I need to check the mind, our mental, our mind, the perceiving, the awareness here, mind. I'll check out that mind. How does it exist? And understanding it is impermanent, I come to understand that there can't be such a solid I. Because if the body changes, and more importantly the mind changes, what would that solid I be? Totally separated from those? How could that kind of solid I exist? But does it mean it's totally non-existent? No, it's not non-existent either. It exists as being merely labeled on different moments of awareness, or different moment of body, of course, too, but mainly different moments of awareness. So it does exist. Okay, so that is with regard to our perception of the I, or misperception of the I. How can we deal with that? But how can we take it from there to the cessation of suffering? Because that is the third truth. The third truth of suffering is, after having understood there's suffering, there are problems, there are symptoms of a disease, having understood the symptoms which are become obvious within the body, then we look at the cause of those symptoms, the cause of the disease or the cause of the symptoms, the origin of suffering, and we'll get to understand that by looking at feeling, by understanding craving, therefore. And then we come to understand, well, if there's a cause, we need to identify the cause and remove it. What do we need to remove? The root misperception. And if we remove that, then the craving cannot arise, and the resultant actions cannot arise, karmic actions cannot arise, and the resultant limited body such as this, we cannot take such a body and have a lifetime, like a long life, with this limited body. So therefore there is a cessation. That's the third truth. The cessation can be understood by understanding the mind. In a sense, where is that cessation? It's in the mind. The cessation is found in the mind. Cessation of suffering, it's actually, you don't go out of existence. You continue to exist. The consciousness, the awareness continues to exist. But now the full potential of the awareness can unfold. Because we no longer take a limited body like that. And the full potential of our mind, being able to love, being able to understand phenomena, etc., all that can now unfold because the restrictions are gone. By understanding the impermanent nature of the mind initially, understanding that mind is changing, so therefore there can't be such a self that we misperceive. But it also doesn't mean that the self is fully non-existent. So we don't go out of existence altogether, but rather we're able to remove the misperception of reality and are left with a liberated mind, a mind that has now reached the cessation of suffering. Does that make sense? It's very complicated, very difficult in a way to just explain it, but once you get it, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? So, by understanding the body, you understand the truth of suffering. By understanding feeling, you understand the origin of suffering. And by understanding the mind, in particular the impermanence of the mind, you can understand that you can remove the cause of suffering and still end up having a consciousness that goes on, that is now liberated, that has now reached the truth of cessation, the reality of the cessation of the misperception of reality. Does that make sense? Okay. And then the last one. Funny, in my mind it was so much easier. When I started explaining, I realized it is complicated, definitely. But it's not anything new. If you have some knowledge of the Dharma, there's nothing, it's just a slightly different way of looking at it. Okay. So then we come to the last phenomena. Now, phenomena here in this context, according to how Lama Tsongkhapa and Gyaltsabje explain them, they do include anything other than feeling and mere perception, just consciousness or mental consciousness. They also include other mental states, which previously, the way that has been explained in the Pali tradition, the division of body, feeling, mind, and phenomena is slightly different. Well, actually, the first two are the same. The body, right? Anything physical, it serves as a basis. Feeling is still feeling. But according to the Pali tradition, mind refers to any mental event other than feeling, and phenomena to the rest. But as Lama Tsongkhapa, in particular in the Golden Rosary, puts it, okay, body is still the same, feeling is still the same as according to the Pali tradition, but mind here mainly refers to primary consciousness, in the sense of consciousness in general that just perceives its object. To understand the cessation of suffering, you only need to understand the fact that consciousness that perceives an object changes moment by moment. That's all. So consciousness, that awareness, that aspect of consciousness, the fact it changes moment by moment, gives you an understanding of the selflessness of a person, and also an understanding of once that is removed, you can have consciousness, awareness that is now free from the misperception and from the other wrong types of afflictions, or wrong consciousnesses or afflictions. Now, how? How do you get there? By way of the path. So you look at phenomena. Now, phenomena include all mental events, all types of awareness, other than feeling and just prime consciousness, just pure awareness. So love, compassion, anger, all the afflictions are part of the phenomena. Okay? And they basically explain the path. That which is to be adopted and that which is to be eliminated. Am I making sense? So that which is to be adopted, love, compassion, mindfulness, those are all parts of, when you look at the four categories, they're not part of the body, they're not part of feeling, they're not part of just pure awareness, just experiencing, perceiving awareness. No, they're part of phenomena. So, those are mental factors, those are mental states that allow us to reach liberation. And then there are the other ones we need to discard. Anger, jealousy, all these other states of mind, those we need to discard. So by understanding phenomena, anything that is not of the other three, we understand basically the means and methods of the medicine that takes us to liberation. What is the medicine that takes us to liberation? Well, it's wisdom, love, compassion, generosity, productive states of mind, and overcoming, that is reducing, weakening negative states of mind, and eventually overcoming them. By listening to teachings, also part of phenomena, by relying on a teacher or an example, by reading texts, it's all parts of phenomena. Right? So anything that is part of the category of phenomena, which is the largest category, it provides us with what we need to become liberated. Does this make sense? Not really. Yeah, all mental factors except feeling. So just to repeat this, only with regard to what you focus on. What is your focal object? It's body, feeling, mind, primary mind, just mind. Mental consciousness is basically mental consciousness's ability to perceive its object. And then the last category, including everything else. So by focusing on the body, we get to understand the unsatisfactory nature of our existence. In other words, the truth of suffering. By focusing on feeling, we get to understand the origin of our suffering, which is craving. Okay, craving. Of course, again, rooted in the misperception, but basically of all the other afflictions, other than the misperception, it is craving. So that is feeling. By understanding feeling, we understand that. By understanding mind, mental consciousness in particular, so mind, just that experience of objects, without talking about love, compassion or anything, just that aspect of the mind that perceives its object, and by understanding the impermanence of that. Okay? Understanding the impermanence of that. Oh, actually I did forget to mention something, sorry. I should now, since I mentioned the impermanence. Actually, when we talk about body, we don't just say we focus on the body, but we focus on the dissatisfactory nature of the body. So you have the body, that's your focus, and then the aspect or the characteristic of being unclean, of being dissatisfactory. That allows us to understand the truth of suffering. Then with regard to feeling, here we're talking about feeling being in the nature of suffering, being in the nature of suffering in the sense that it does not provide us with lasting happiness. So the kind of feeling we experience right now, it's not a type of feeling that lasts, even if it's a positive type of feeling, and it's very limited. So basically it's a feeling that only gives rise to affliction. It's not the type of feeling we actually want to achieve, which is lasting happiness. It's none of those. So when we talk about it, our ordinary feeling, understanding that it's in the nature of suffering, we understand the origin of suffering. That is the afflictions, mainly craving. And then when we take the mind, that basic experiencing faculty of awareness, in particular mental consciousness, and we understand its impermanence, we understand that the self as we perceive it can't exist as a permanent concrete thing. At the same time, it is not totally non-existent, because it is still changing. Consciousness is changing, so if something is changing, it cannot be totally non-existent. So there's still a conventional I that is imputed on the basis of a changing consciousness. And if we understand that, we can remove that misperception, that misunderstanding with regard to a solid, inherent, objective I, and that mental consciousness is then free, liberated from that misperception, which means we understand the cessation of suffering, which is found in the stream of mental consciousness. The mental consciousness does not go out of existence. It's not like when you're liberated, you stop existing. No, cessation, it can be misunderstood in English just as in Tibetan. Cessation seems to apply becoming nothing, going out of existence. Here it means just a certain aspect of the mind that is disturbing, a certain aspect of the mind that harms us, that is removed. But consciousness goes on. So through understanding, therefore, the nature, the impermanent nature of mental consciousness or of mind, then we can understand that cessation is possible. And so then how is that cessation possible? What is the means to the cessation of the origin of suffering and therefore of suffering? By way of understanding the method that takes us there. And for that we understand all other phenomena. All other phenomena as the basis, understanding those phenomena that are to be adopted, that needs to be generated, that need to be cultivated, and those we need to get rid of. So basically all the other states of mind, other than the second feeling, and mind, just general mind, no. We talk about anger, attachment, jealousy, misperception of reality, all those which have not been included in the first three, we need to get rid of. And then instead we need to cultivate love, compassion, patience, generosity, diligence, and so forth. So by understanding phenomena and that which is to be eliminated and that which is to be adopted, we understand the path. Does that make sense? That's it? Not that difficult, right? I mean, once you've explained it. But that way of looking at the four types of mindfulness and the Four Noble Truths gives you a sense that everything you learn in Buddhism is connected to everything else. You see, you can shift things around slightly and you integrate the Four Noble Truths, explain mindfulness by way of the Four Noble Truths. You explain mindfulness by way of explaining the true truth, the 12 links, and everything else. It connects to everything else. But here mindfulness is that which is important in the beginning, in the middle, and in the end. And likewise the Four Noble Truths are important in the beginning, the middle, and the end. So that they're strongly connected, there is no doubt. Okay? And so when we meditate as part of our practice, it's not sufficient to just do one type of meditation or another type. No, we need to have variety. Focus on one practice for some time, but then slightly shift it. In the same way as when you exercise. If you want to exercise, you have a certain exercises you do, but in order to train the mind, the body further, you adjust them. Like think of an athlete, for instance. It's not like they go, 5 times with the same weights every day. No, they adjust them. The body changes, so accordingly, you have different exercises, different ways of training the body. So here with the mind is the same. There are different ways of training the mind. So the 4 types of mindfulness are the basis, the way as described in the Pali tradition, but that is not enough. That is the foundation, but from there you need to apply mindfulness to the Four Noble Truths. So this is the way it's applied to the Four Noble Truths. And then you apply it to love, compassion, and so forth. But in the scriptures, what is described is applied to the Four Noble Truths. If you understand those well, you understand how to do the rest. You understand the mechanism, basically, behind it. Why? And then you can apply it to other phenomena. Of course, you have the Four Noble Truths also from the point of view of the Mahayana, where the suffering is the absence of omniscience. The origin is cognitive obscurations. It's that which keeps you from enlightenment. The cessation is enlightenment, and the path is the Mahayana. Usually the Four Noble Truths are described from the point of view of liberation. Good old suffering. Good old suffering, it's the truth of suffering. The afflictions, or afflictive obscurations, that which keeps us from being liberated, is the origin. Cessation is getting rid of that, and path is the way to get rid of it. But once you're liberated, that doesn't mean you're a Buddha, because you still have the imprints, the residue from the afflictions. Still some imprint there, some residue there. So then when you are liberated but not yet enlightened, you still have not reached your full potential of knowing all phenomena, of being omniscient and therefore being able to guide others in the most effective way. So when you apply it to the Mahayana, the truth is suffering. The suffering is not being a Buddha yet, not being omniscient yet. So you no longer have what we usually call suffering, but you still have not reached your fullest potential. And the origin of that is the cognitive obscurations, the obscurations to omniscience. You got rid of the obscurations to liberation, but you're still left with the obscurations to enlightenment. The sensation is the fact that your mind can get rid of them. You can have this pure mind that's got nothing left to keep it from knowing all phenomena. And the path is the Mahayana. It's not that difficult. So seriously, if you understand the Four Noble Truths in those two ways, you understand all of Buddhism. Therefore, the Four Noble Truths are described as the framework. So when you learn Buddhism, it's kind of the framework, and everything fits somewhere in those four. Or if you expand it to the Mahayana, in those 8, as just described. And so mindfulness fits in exactly that way. Does that make sense? Yeah, I know it's confusing, I know it's difficult, but saying it twice, saying it 3 times, already you're understanding. I mean, your faces definitely don't have the same question marks that they had this morning. Oh, I lost everybody. Okay. But at least I seem to entertain you because you don't nod off. Okay, so let's take a break. And then we continue with meditating on what I just taught. So just to internalize what I taught. And hopefully you have the opportunity to start with this, but if not today, definitely tomorrow. It's not easy, but it's also not impossible to understand. So I'm still hopeful because this goes more into emptiness and selflessness. Okay, great. Let's take a break. Not that you don't understand it, but there's so much terminology, there's so much stuff. To tell you the truth, I did give you this, and I could have given you more. But I thought, no. Because there is part of the understanding is struggling with juggling the concepts. It's part of training your mind, to expand your mind, to keep hold of an object and go back again and again and understand it better. If I write it all down, you keep looking at the paper, so you think you understand, and when you leave and you don't look in the paper, that's it, it's gone. Whereas if you've got nothing, I know I was offered the whiteboard. I chose not to use the whiteboard. It would have been much easier if I just written body, feeling, etc. But then the moment I wipe it out, it's wiped out of your mind. Whereas in this way I force you, well, or not, if you just give up. But basically, in a way, by repeating it again and again, your mind holds on to those concepts and you generate a mental image. And that's what I want you to do. Have this category in your mind. Body, feeling, mind, and phenomena. There you go. I don't need to write it on the wall. You already have it in your mind. You'll be able to keep it. And then expand on that mental image that you have. So we're talking about mindfulness, focusing on those objects. Okay? So the question that Tomea had, so what does it mean to meditate on mindfulness? Right? That's basically your question. So is mindfulness the object? Right? Or if our mind arises as mindfulness, we don't need to meditate on it because we already have it. We don't need to cultivate it because we already have it. Right? Good question. Good question. Because there are 2 ways of meditating on mindfulness, in fact. The first type, yesterday I described the benefits of mindfulness. So if you contemplate, even while I talk about it, you reflect on it, you're meditating, in fact. You familiarize yourself with the benefits of mindfulness. It's a type of meditation here by making mindfulness your object. Okay? Or in the case of love, if you meditate on love, what are the benefits of meditating on love? What are the benefits of meditating on bodhicitta? So instead of having bodhicitta in your continuum, you meditate, you make it your object. But there's another way in which you can meditate on something that is a type of consciousness. You meditate on it by making it arise in your own continuum. You make it manifest. It arises in your mind. So the meditation we did at the beginning of the session was of the second type. I basically ask you to generate mindfulness of the body. So you had mindfulness in your continuum. Do you mean you don't have to meditate on it? Of course you need to meditate. That was baby mindfulness. It has to be strengthened. It has to be enhanced. So you generate it in your own continuum, but by generating it, by keeping it there, by holding it, and continuing on, expanding on it, you strengthen it. You make it stronger. You make it more focused. You familiarize yourself with it. So that's the second type of meditation, which in the case of meditating on states of mind is very important. So what do you think with the bodhisattva? A bodhisattva who generates bodhicitta for the first time. You don't think they meditate on bodhicitta again? They meditate on bodhicitta shortly before they become enlightened. Again and again generate bodhicitta to strengthen it. Because every time it is generated in the continuum, it grows stronger, it grows stronger. So when we talk about someone practicing to become a Buddha, in other words, a bodhisattva, all these awarenesses, love, compassion, and so forth, he or she has to generate them again and again in his and her continuum, again and again. So that's meditation, becoming familiar with them. Right? We meditate all the time. We become familiar with our afflictions all the time. We meditate on our anger by allowing our anger to rise and to fester. And then it grows stronger. We do this all the time. We basically meditate on anger, meditate on our afflictions. But because they're harmful and because they don't bring us what we actually wish for, lasting happiness, we now try to replace the anger with love and compassion. Okay? So that's an important point. So likewise with mindfulness here, the second meditation I want to do with you is meditation on the second placement, close placement of mindfulness on feeling. Right? Okay, so basically I ask you to generate mindfulness. Right? Being aware, being mindful, keeping in mind, basically, and actually any meditation has mindfulness. So it's not like this is the only time. Every time you meditate, there is alertness, there's mindfulness, and there's introspection, if you do it properly. So here in this case, we use mindfulness in relation to the Four Noble Truths, in particular body, feeling, and so forth. So the body we've done, let's do feeling now. Okay. Now this time I will not ask you to watch your feeling, because that's a little harder. Because the body's there, it's fully there, you can watch it. Feeling would be something you should do when feeling actually arises. Strong pleasure, strong displeasure. So I forgot to remind you in the break, because I went over time. So I don't know whether you did it in the break time. If you did, great. If you didn't, never mind. Now the next opportunity will be the next break time. In between session. Just watch your feeling. And I'll remind you again. Please, someone needs to remind me of the time. I'm always get carried away with the time. Can someone remind me 10 minutes to 6 so that I can at least explain that practice of the in-between session that you please do while not in class here? Okay, but if someone can remind me 10 minutes before, thank you. Okay, so then with regard to mindfulness of feeling here, what we do in this coming session, we'll take feeling and analyze it, not just watching our feeling, which you do in the in-between session, but rather how feeling gives rise to the afflictions, craving in particular, but also, of course, anger, etc. So in that way, understand better the origin of suffering, which in other words is the afflictions. So we leave aside the part of watching feelings, the way we scan through the body initially. There's not that much time, but we go right away into that analytical meditation by generating mindfulness. And again, as before, we'll start with a little bit of breathing, just to focus the mind, empty the mind. And then I'll start talking. So you generate mindfulness by way of analyzing. And at the very end, whatever feeling, whatever conclusion you come to, which is a type of feeling in a sense, not pleasant or unpleasant, but some kind of conclusion you come to, you just focus on that single-pointedly to allow it to sink deeper. All right, let's do that together.